G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old newspaper report about a possible Bunyip encounter near Rutherglen Victoria in the 1860s, so we'll get into it. This was published in Melbourne's The Herald on Monday, the 14th of May, 1888, titled A Mysterious Animal. Does the bunyip really exist? All old colonists who, in the early days, came more intimately in contact with the Aboriginals than it is now possible to do, will remember their many stories concerning some large, ferocious and mysterious animal which, in their tongue, they call the bunyip. One and all, they were in most abject fear of this creature, and though none could be found who had actually seen a bunyip, they could all give descriptions of it. And strange to say, these descriptions were very nearly always similar, though the Aborigines who gave them were members of tribes occupying tracts of land hundreds of miles apart, speaking different dialects, and hardly likely to have had any communication. In matters of detail they might differ, but on the main features, their descriptions of the supposed monster and its habits singularly agreed. They all persisted that the bunyip frequented lakes, lagoons and rivers, and came on land at night to prey on other animals. However, no such animal was ever seen, or any traces of it found. So far as was made public, people became incredulous and set the story down to the superstitious of the Aboriginals, or at least to a tradition among them handed down from bygone ages. Still, there were not a few old bushmen who at times heard loud roaring noises at night for which they could not account, and many of these, remembering that the natives all declared that the bunyip made a loud roaring at night, were not slow to attach some credence to the Aboriginals' stories. Even scientific men, since the discovery of bones and fossils of a large animal, in some respects resembling a lion, though probably amphibious, have come to the conclusion that there was, at least at one time, foundation for the statements of the Aboriginals. Of late years, from time to time, bunyip stories have been revived, and at one time it was hoped that the remains of one of them, in an advanced state of decomposition, had been found north of Riverina. But these, we believe, eventually turned out to be the mangled remains of a horse, to which a singular appearance had been given by a partial immersion in water, river weeds and sand. The question came to the front again a few days ago, when we published a paragraph from a correspondent describing the consternation caused in the Goulburn Valley by loud roaring heard at night proceeding from the Goulburn Valley Lake. As bearing upon this, we have before us a letter from Mr. W. J. Childs of 27 Mary Street, Fitzroy, detailing his strange experiences in the neighbourhood of the Murray near Rutherglen some 27 years ago. As the question is now of considerable interest to Australians, we give the letter in full as follows. I see by your last Tuesday evening's paper, 8th of May, that a correspondent writing from the Goulburn Valley says, great consternation has been created among the more superstitious of our settlers along the river by a roaring sound, which seems to proceed from the lagoon near the river every night. You, Mr. Editor, say we attribute it to a bull, but others wildly assert that it is either an escaped lion or a bunyip, and are afraid to venture outside their houses at night in consequence. Now, sir, I am certain there is no superstitious nonsense to this matter, as I am certain that the roaring sound proceeds from a real live bunyip. With your kind permission, I will, through your valuable paper, give the people of the Goulburn Valley my experience of one night with a bunyip on Lake Moodmere, near the River Murray. I have no doubt there are many people who remember the first rush to the Rutherglen goldfields, which took place about 27 years ago. At this time, I and my mates were working a claim at the head of the Robbie Burns lead. There being no water on the goldfield, we had to cart the wash dirt to Lake Moodmere to wash it, where one of my mates and myself built a puddling machine and camped. We made a canoe out of a hollow log and used it for fishing and shooting on the lake. One night I was out in my canoe fishing in an arm of the lake opposite where I was camped. There was a long strip of land running down to the entrance of the lake, which divided the main lake from the arm that I was fishing in. It was moonlight and about 2 a.m. There were several horses quietly grazing down towards the junction of the arm and the entrance to the lake, when suddenly I was terror-stricken by the great stampede of the horses through the bush, screaming and roaring like mad. At the commencement of the screaming of the horses, the bunyip, or whatever animal it was, plunged into the water about 100 yards from where I was fishing. It made a tremendous displacement and commotion in the water, so much so that I had great difficulty in steadying myself in the canoe until I could get to the bank to get out. I am quite satisfied that the bunyip is a large animal, and I think somewhat similar to the hippopotamus, and it has always been in my opinion that the bunyip seized one of the horses and plunged it into the water with it, which was the cause of the dreadful screaming that came from the horse or horses. Although it was moonlight, I did not see the animal, owing to the shadow of the great gum trees which were abound there, but I heard the great splash and saw the displacement of the water where he, the bunyip, went in. I shifted my tent the next day to my claim on Robbie Burns, and though this was about 6 miles from the lake, I could lay there in my bed and distinctly hear the roaring of the bunyip at night. The roaring is something like that of a lion and a bull mixed, and can be heard over 6 miles from the lake. There is no doubt that this animal coming out of the water and travelling about on land at night. I feel quite sure that the people of the Goulburn Valley are quite right when they say the roaring sound came from the lake. It is hardly possible to believe that this roaring animal in the Goulburn Valley is the same animal that I am writing about, that was in the lake Moodmere some 27 years ago. But it is proof that the bunyip does still exist in the lakes and backwaters of the River Murray. I have had a deal of talk with the Murray Aboriginals about the bunyip, but I never met an Aborigine that had ever seen one, but they all seemed very much frightened when talking about the bunyip. They all describe the bunyip as a large animal. They say, "Plenty big fella, that one, plenty big, debble. And in describing it, they will say, old black fella seen him, bunyip, plenty big fella, plenty big head, plenty big eye, plenty big mouth, plenty big teeth." I have a fancy that if a few charges of dynamite were placed in the deepest parts of the Goulburn Valley Lake and firing the dynamite commenced from the end of the lake nearest the river, it would either blow the Bunyip up or drive him out at the other end of the lake where a few mounted police could be ready to shoot him. The end. Well, that's a pretty interesting story. It's weird because he didn't see the Bunyip or whatever it was, but the way he heard the horses screaming and he was positive one got taken into the lake, that must have been just absolutely terrifying and that. And he said he could hear it from over 6 miles away, and it got him to move his tent because he didn't want to camp there. And whether it was a bunyip, a seal, or even a yowie, who knows, but it would have been scary to be out there. All very interesting stuff. Okay, that's it from me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.